Hello everybody, Ben Woodruff here, and in today's video we are going to be talking about Osage orange trees, Osage orange bows, and also the strange history about how this tree came to be and what it meant to Native peoples. It's got some very strange tie-ins that you're probably not expecting. So I've done archery my whole life, ever since I was a little kid. I enjoy archery, and this is one of the best woods we have in North America for making bows. And but in order to understand this a little better, then I think it's important that we talk a little bit about archery and the three main types of bows that were used in North America, and then let's talk about Osage orange trees. Okay, so to start off with, let's take a look at bows at all. We're going to be talking, of course, about the Osage orange bow and the Osage orange tree, but we got to understand archery a little bit here. There's basically three kinds of bows. I'm not talking about the wood, but three types of bows that were used in America. And I'm not talking about the shape or the style or the size. I'm talking about the construction. The first one is a self bow. This is a self bow that I'm about done with. It's made out of juniper wood, not the best wood, but this is what a lot of the tribes here in Utah made. And a self bow is just itself. It's kind of a dumb name. There's a lot of archery terms that are kind of dumb, like a person who makes bows is a bowyer. It's kind of a dumb term, but yeah, whatever. I don't make up these terms. I've done archery my whole life, and a self bow is pretty simple. Now, you remember when we were little kids, you go get a stick, or maybe if you have bamboo growing by your house, you're like, yay! And I remember the thing that I misunderstood as a kid was I would get like a big rubber band or a big piece of like bungee cord. And my misunderstanding was that you had a curved stick and that the string was what was stretchy. It's not true. The actual wood is what bends. The string, the bow string, is solid. It doesn't stretch. So a self bow is just a bow carved out of wood, one piece of wood, that's it. And it's, you can't flub on it. They're not easy to make, and juniper wood is not the best wood to make it out of. But again, in my state, in northern Utah, this is what the tribes normally made it out of. Now, if you look at juniper trees are usually twisted and all over the place. So finding a straight juniper is hard, and making a juniper self bow is very hard. And doing it with ancient tools, with stone tools, would have been insanely hard. But they did it. I did this with modern tools and modern stone knives and a small hand axe, and it works. You can see it's powerful. It's a good bow. That's a self bow. The next kind of bow is the best bow, which is, well, I take that back. I recant. There's different bows for different reasons. The best bow anciently, because you can cheat, is the sinew-backed bow. Now, I've got a sinew-backed bow here, and you can't tell that it's sinew-backed. So if you can see, it's kind of cool. I've got rattlesnake skins that I put on this. So what I did is I made a self bow, and I made this self bow with the strength of a child's bow, like something like I think I was like 12, 13 when I started doing archery, and it's something about that age, what I would have used at that age. Then what you do is then you take tendons from animals, and then you take hide glue, which is granulized rawhide, and you put that in a pot almost to a boil, but not a boil, and you soak the sinews, the tendons, in it. And you start on one end, and then you go over and you put a layer here, and then you put a layer here, and then you put a layer here, and you put a layer here, and you go the whole length. Then you do at least one other layer of this, and it's got to overlap. Anywhere that there is a kind of like a joint, you got to have it overlap there. Then you let it dry out for like a week. And the first time you pull back a sinew-backed bow, you're going to hear a crack sound. And after that, you've made it strong. Now you got to sand it down after the fact. And then I put this rattlesnake skin on the front. So what that sinew backing does is it gives it strength. It gives it power. So the nice thing is, like, this bow is right on the brink of breaking. Like, first time I pulled it back, I heard a little crack, and I'm like, so there's a fine line between the bow is strong enough, but it's almost going to break every time. If you sinew back it, it gets stronger. So just make a little kid bow and then add sinew until it's stronger. So that's what most of the tribes would do, is they would sinew back a bow. And I think here at the Hutchings Museum, we've got a sinew back bow also that was, it's about this size, and we'll show some clips of that as well. So sinew backing was really good. The last kind is the composite bow. Now, I have made a composite bow here, but it doesn't look like a normal composite bow, so I'll get to that in a second. So a composite bow, the most famous composite bows are in Asia, and like the Mongolian, horse bows, and these are recurve bows, and these are made out of pieces of horn. And those sections of horn, you'll have a tiny strip of maybe bamboo or wood in the center, and then the rest is horn. And horn is far more flexible, which allows you to get those incredible recurve shapes. When you see these Mongolian horn bows strung versus unstrung, it's like, whoa, it's like it completely goes like this. It's wild, but they're powerful bows. Making a horn bow requires the use of hide glue, and it requires the use of clamps. Not many Native American tribes did that, but some did with buffalo horn, and they would do wood wedge clamps. It's a pain to make a horn bow. And the worst part is horn, any horn, whether it's a buffalo horn or a bighorn sheep. We have seen some bighorn composite bows made by Native Americans. Horn is keratin. Keratin is fingernail material. It's the same thing as hair, which is filled with oils. Oils do not adhere to hide glue. So you're making a bow that's glued together, and what is it gluing together? Something that is filled with oils that repel glue. Not a very good thing. So there's all kinds of ways that they would leach out and wash and get those oils out of the horn before use. It's kind of a pain, but that's what they did. So this composite bow I made out of several pieces of bamboo, thin strips of bamboo, and then I glued layers of hide glue together. So again, what you have is a very powerful, very resilient bow that can bend more than perhaps a regular bow could. But it doesn't look like a regular composite bow, but this is a composite bow. So these are kind of the three main types of bows: the self bow, the sinew-backed bow, and the composite bow. These are the three bows we see in North America. Now, what woods do we use? Well, yew wood from the yew tree is well known to be an incredible wood. In the Pacific Northwest, those tribes have access to yew wood. And we know in like medieval Europe, the archers like Robin Hood, if he was real, would have been using a yew wood bow. I've never made a yew wood bow. It's a lot of work. We don't have, the yew trees we have growing around here are bushes. So I'm not gonna make one, but someday I would like to. So otherwise, if you're gonna make a bow, whether it's a self bow or a self bow that you add sinew to and make a sinew back bow, it's what's available. I've seen Eastern tribes make maple wood bows. There's local woods that work really good. Salt cedar, believe it or not. I've heard tribes made salt cedar bows, so I made one and I'm like, it worked. Use juniper if you can. The best wood, arguably, in North America is the Osage orange tree. It's a beautiful wood. It's a beautiful bow. It works very well. And this was the most famous, both for a self bow and a sinew-backed bow. It's just a glorious, glorious wood. But this tree used to grow all across North America, and it's becoming very rare now for a very strange reason. So I want to get into that. So let's jump into this and let's talk about why the Osage orange tree was so prolific and so accessible to Native Americans, and why now it's becoming very hard to find. Well, that gives you a little bit of background on the type of archery that was done in North America. Before archery, and somewhat contemporaneous with it, was the use of the atlatl. The atlatl is a two-part system. This is the atlatl, and it shoots one of these. This is called a dart. It's like an arrow on steroids. It's like a 4 to 6 foot long arrow, but it's thousands of years before arrows. This is what people used during the Ice Age to hunt. They also use spears, but mostly they use atlatls to hunt the megafauna of North America. But eventually, as people started to switch to smaller and smaller animals, as the bigger animals were dying off and being killed off, then the switch went to bows and arrows. Bows and arrows are a lot harder to make than this. I mean, this is an elaborate version. It's kind of fancy, but it's basically just a stick with a hook on one end. You can make that pretty easy, and it's kind of easier to use, and it's good for going after big animals. So, switching to archery, it takes a long time to make a bow. I make bows. It takes me weeks to make a bow. It's not a lot of fun, but then when it gets all done, cool, you get to go do some archery, and you can hunt small to medium animals. Anything from as small as a squirrel to a buffalo or a moose, right? Where before, when people were using these, they were going anything from like a turkey all the way up to a woolly mammoth. So there's some crossover there as well. But people began switching to archery, and as I mentioned, one of the best bow woods was the Osage Orange tree. Now, Osage Orange trees, they're a stately looking tree. They're a big, stately, strong tree. And they're mostly kind in the southeast, but they used to be all over the place, and now they're becoming rare. Now, this tree makes these enormous fruit, these oranges, which where it gets named the Osage Orange. These things are enormous. They can be up to as big as like a volleyball. And if you grab them, you open them up, they're sticky. They're not really edible for humans. They're not sweet to human taste. But to an animal, like if you fed it to a cow, they'd be like, oh boy, this is sweet. And so they're meant, these giant oranges are meant to be eaten whole. They're providing sweetness that is considered sweet to the animal kingdom. And they are trying to lure animals to eat them whole. And then later on in the day, as they go out and about, then when that animal goes to the bathroom, it's going to poop out the seeds. The seeds will have germinated properly and will now be dispersed. And so this is how this tree used to be dispersed all across America. What was the animals that ate them? Well, it was the megafauna. It was mostly the browsers. So mastodons, we know, were a biggie. Mastodons are browsers, not grazers. They're living in the same forest as these Osage orange trees, and mastodons would have no problem just plucking them down with their trunk and swallowing them whole and eating them. We also know that giant ground sloths also ate them and swallowed them whole, chomped them on down, and then when the sloths moved around wherever they went, they dispersed these seeds. You also had American camels. We had many species of camels in North America. Two of them were as tall as a giraffe, like Titanotilopus and Gigantocamelus. These are enormous camels. And camels love to eat sweet things like that. They'll just go up to a tree and they got a big old long neck, eat that fruit. So in other words, the megafauna of North America co-evolved with the Osage orange tree. And so the Osage orange is making an offering. Here, if you eat this fruit, I will provide you some sweetness and some carbs here that you can convert into energy. And in exchange, you will go poop my seeds out somewhere else. And so those things got bigger and bigger, because if you're a small animal, like if you don't want to appeal to something like a squirrel, or a deer. If you have small fruit like an apple, deer will eat apples. Okay, well, they're gonna, 100 yards away, they're gonna poop. No, we need broad distribution. Mammoths and mastodons and camels, they're gonna range. They're gonna go 20 miles away before they go to the bathroom. So that's much more advantageous to make a fruit so big that only really big, wide-ranging animals can disperse your seeds so that you can, colonize the landscape in a better rate. Those animals aren't here anymore. They're gone. And so because of that, the natural distributors of the Osage tree are gone. And so now you have this bumper crop of these enormous fruit, and they just fall, and humans don't want them. Modern animals don't want them either, because they are, they're sticky. They don't have much that's edible about them. They're desirable to big, giant, prehistoric browsers that are no longer with us. Now, we know some of these guys ate them because we found in caves, like even in Utah, when there are piles of dung that are just dried out from things like giant ground sloths and Columbian mammoths. And among the refuge that we find there, we find, bits of different plants. And among them, we find Osage orange seeds. Well, there's no wild Osage orange trees growing in the southwest of Utah or the United States now, but there were. They're gone now because, again, the browsers that eat them are no longer distributing them, and so they can't proliferate like they used to. So the wood of this tree is very beautiful. It's good to work with. The outside is kind of normal colored, but then when you get into the heartwood itself is really rich and red and beautiful. A lot of woodworkers like to use it. They like to make tables and furniture out of it. But again, for making it for a bow, this is one of the best woods, and it's a very good wood to make either a sinew-backed bow or a self bow. And again, the tribes, again, the color is beautiful. You think about in the landscape of North America, most of the North American landscape, other than the Southwest, the colors are pretty muted. You know, you have grays and browns and greens are pretty muted colors most of the year. And so, you know, a bright red Osage Orange bow, where did my bow go? It's over there. That's a bright color. For us, it's like, it's red. But to ancient eyes, that was bold, that was beautiful, that was exciting. It was a really unique color, something to kind of show off. And so, you know, that's part of the reason why it was probably originally gravitated towards. But it was such a good bow for that use that, again, even today, many bow makers, myself included, love to get a nice Osage stave and make an Osage Orange bow. So again, it's sad that this tree is reducing its range and not getting spread the way it used to. So hopefully people can have enough interest in it to plant it decoratively and put it in a park, put it in your yard, because it's a unique tree and it's really cool. So, but that is kind of the whirlwind history of the Osage Orange tree and the Osage Orange bow. So I hope you enjoyed learning all of this. And if you haven't already, if you could hit subscribe. And always remember that life is a gift. So never stop learning and never stop exploring. We'll see you next time.